Well, good afternoon, everyone. Maybe it's good morning. I can see one of you, at least in Canada, in the chat. It might be evening time where you are. Maybe it's the middle of the night. Maybe you got up in the middle of the night to watch this. Wouldn't that be something? Anyway, wherever you are in the world, welcome. I'm really pleased to be spending this half hour with you on the subject of Yoga Nidra and how we can unravel from a painful past. That was the promise of the webinar. So I'd like to start out by just taking a little bit of time to define a couple of things so we're all on the same page. And the first thing, of course, to talk about is Yoga Nidra. What is Yoga Nidra? Some of you know it. I can see a few yoga titles in the chat box, so some of you will be familiar with it. But essentially, Yoga Nidra, or NSDR, non-sleep deep rest, as it's increasingly becoming known as, is really a kind of a modern adaptation of a traditional practice where the person that's engaging is invited to maybe lie down or sit down or be comfortable and essentially inquire, turn their attention into their own experience. And on its surface level, what Yoga Nidra has to offer us is a really good rest. And having a look around in the world right now, looks to me like most people could do with a bit more rest in their lives. It's very rare that I have someone get in touch with me and say, I'm totally happy and really doing so well in my life, and I'm massively stressed. Most of the time, people are saying, I've got too much going on, too much to do, too much to understand, too many balls in the air, and I want to know how to stop. So one of the most wonderful things about Yoga Nidra is it's a very accessible way that we can stop. And it has quite a different face to some of the other traditions of yoga and the other approaches that we might take to get towards a kind of quiet essence. So the most familiar one that we know might be Hatha Yoga, where we're moving. And Yoga Nidra is much more of a surrender. So in that way, anyone can do it. Anyone, at least, who's willing to have a look inside themselves. And therein becomes an interesting thing. Because on its surface, Yoga Nidra is having this lovely lay down, and it's all relaxing and cozy and gorgeous. And oh, I've really got into this practice, and I'm maybe falling asleep a little bit. That's what I did for the first 18 months of Yoga Nidra before I started to recover my energy and could actually stay awake for the practice. And then one day something happens when we're lying there, and maybe we start to weep for no reason at all. I've had people come up to me at the end of classes. I remember a very sweet lady many years ago coming up to me with an eye pillow and saying, I'm so sorry, I got mascara on your eye pillow. And we had a conversation, and she kind of expressed that she had one of these mysterious moments of weeping where she just felt safe and calm and grounded. And suddenly whatever was there in her body could come up and be felt and experienced. So actually, one of the things that happens when we practice this laying down, which we're calling Yoga Nidra, but we could just say having a lay down, is we get close to the edge of sleep. And as we start to nod off, or we get very close to it, we enter into a between state called the hypnagogic state. Now, one of the lesser known things about this particular state is not only do you pass through it every night that you go to sleep, but it only lasts a couple of minutes, but it produces exactly the same brain waves and frequencies that meditation brings about. So as we get into this kind of relaxed, almost drifting off state, our thinking mind starts to settle. We're more able to inhabit the sense of our body. And for all of you that get the joy of falling asleep every night, it's lovely, isn't it? It's kind of soporific and yummy. And we feel like I can kind of relax and give into this. So what we're really doing is we're fast tracking into a meditative state. And as we get into this change of brain waves, we get a little bit closer to the unconscious mind, to the part of us which is kind of inaccessible by intelligence. We might think or know something, but our unconscious chooses to do something else. A great example would be an intention to not put your hand in the cookie jar at night. And you manage a couple of days, and then on the Wednesday, you find yourself having eaten cookies with biscuit crumbs all down your front, going, oh, that's funny. I'm sure I chose that I wasn't going to do that. That's the unconscious. And the unconscious essentially is driving much more than you realize. It's about 85, 90% of your activity in the day, and 90% of your kind of intake of information, we could say, goes into the unconscious mind. So when we rest, we practice Yoga Nidra and we get close to sleep, it may feel lovely and yummy and wonderful, and maybe it always will be for you, but one day something's likely to come knocking on your door, and that is coming up from your unconscious. And that is essentially what's going to happen. So I've had some conversations with people over the years. I remember a very lively one in London with a few big group of peers, actually. And at the time, people were saying, Yoga Nidra, trauma, are you sure? I'm not sure about that. And here's what I would say from years of using it as a modality to help people recover from trauma. And in a few moments, I'll share a bit of the research around it as well, so you know that I'm not just making it up, is that Yoga Nidra is perhaps the most ideal way of us coming to meet some of that content that might rise up. Here's a little bit more of the why. So we've established that there's that lovely hypnagogic soporific state. Or we could say it another way, which is when we're learning to practice Yoga Nidra, one of the first things that we'll be asked to do is to, if we're still awake, this is, take our attention through our body. And if you've ever practiced Yoga Nidra with me, maybe you already visit the Eckhart Yoga website and you've tried some of these practices, or you've tried it yourself, you will start in a particular body area. The way I like to start is in the mouth and with the tongue, because they're very sensitive as areas of sensation, but the hands are equally sensitive. We could start there. And we begin to turn or take our consciousness around the body. So we're starting to touch into this sensation. And one of the things that happens without us trying to is that we get a tremendous relaxation. Not by trying to relax the body, not by saying, relax the arm, relax the shoulder. We could do it that way. The way I prefer to teach, and if you're interested in the training that's on the academy, the way that you'll learn about through my training there, will be much more to invite people into experiencing what's here. So rather than trying to relax our jaw, how about feeling into the jaw, meeting the tension that's there, meeting the sensations? And then a paradoxical thing occurs. When we can welcome things as they are, and this will become really important in another 5 minutes' time through the talk, when we can welcome things as they are, we're able to be with them, and what we stop fighting against, we're able to actually move over or transcend. So there's this very powerful potential, very, very much at the early stages of Yoga Nidra, if it's taught well, where we're invited into being with different sensations in the body. Maybe some places that are tight, painful or uncomfortable, other places that feel numb, other places that feel pleasant, tingly even. And we're really getting in touch with all of these sensations. As we do that, our thinking tends to kind of drop because it's very hard to feel and think at the same time. And then the next phase of Yoga Nidra, or the next kosha, as it's called, kosha means layer of our human experience. The next kosha that we meet is the breath and our energetic self. So the body, of course, is nothing without the energy that enlivens it and moves it. And we can access that and harness that through the breath, but we can also get in touch with the subtle sensations of the aliveness of the body. It could be the sense of blood pulsing through the body. It could be different flows of subtle sensations that we can begin to tune into and experience. And this is part of that journey of Yoga Nidra, becoming more and more sensitive so you can feel more and more subtle possibility here. All of this, along with one other thing that I'm going to talk about, forms a kind of foundation for us, which we could call like a bedrock or a ground of well-being. body's becoming more relaxed. We're able to perceive subtle sensation. Our mind is settling. And we're falling into that kind of hypnagogic, soporific, lovely state. If we weave in, along with that, some reflections on what's good or what's supportive in our lives right now, if we start to contemplate a little bit on where we are lifted up or held by life, or where we've done well, or we feel seen, where we belong, those people that love us, we're able to start to impact our brain and our mind. And we begin to influence something called the default mode network, part of us that tends to blah, blah, blah on about our life all day. And we flip that from having a negativity bias, from being worried and looking out for problems, which gives us this sort of hypervigilance and this inability to settle, into a calmer state. And you'll learn about this in depth in the Eckhart Yoga Academy Yoga Nidra training. So all of these are like foundational tools. So let's assume then that we have that bedrock of well-being. Isn't that enough? Surely that would be great, wouldn't it? If you could just feel calm and at ease. And it would, wouldn't it? It would be lovely. And some of you do it already. Maybe you get that through your hatha yoga practice, or you get it through drinking a couple of beers and watching your favorite bits of box set on Netflix. It doesn't have to be something special, but we can all find ways to calm down, whether they're positive and supportive or not. But actually, the purpose of this bedrock of well-being in the context of trauma, which we're talking about this evening, this afternoon, this morning for some of you, is that we're now able to feel okay again. Our nervous system is settled. Our body and mind are less racing, less anxious, less vigilant. And we have a capacity now to begin to meet and greet and welcome, potentially even integrate some of our painful past, which was the subject line of this whole webinar. So how and why? Why would we want to do that? Why would you want to disturb your peace? Well, here's the thing. For those of you that have calmed down, and I'm sure we all have in our lives at some point, we get calm, we get settled. Maybe it's a phase in our life that we have where things seem very easy, or we get a new lover or a new dog or whatever it might be, and everything seems wonderful. And then inevitably, something comes along to upset you. Something comes along to interfere with your peace and your happiness. Maybe someone says something unpleasant, or you have a difficult interaction, or you have your own uprising of anxiety that came out of goodness knows where, but seems like it's here to stay. And then we might go back and we go, oh, I'm going to practice Yoga Nidra again. I'm going to lie down on the floor and I'm going to get calm and settled and comfortable. And it takes maybe 20 minutes to get there because you're a bit stressed out. And then you finally get, and then you come out of Yoga Nidra and you check your phone and you got another message from this person that's irritated you and you're back in the game again. So the idea of meeting what's upsetting us with this calm ground of well-being is actually to get to what's upsetting us. Now, that could be our conditioning. It could be beliefs that we hold to be true about ourselves or the world. It could be all sorts of internal factors. But it is true that if you take 3 different people's responses to the same circumstance, they will all have different emotional responses, or there's a very strong chance of them having varied emotional responses. So it's not always about what's outside. It's not always about the finger pointing out. It's like going, oh, look, there's these 3 fingers here and there. Oh, they're pointing back at me. So that hopefully gives you some conviction and realization to the value of starting to meet ourselves. Now let's talk specifically about trauma. So how would we work in a kind of skillful way to start to meet traumatic memory, painful past? And I'm really being deliberate about using the word skillful. Let's give some framing of how we might do that in the context of Yoga Nidra. The first thing that we want to consider is what's called tritation. We don't want to get that sense of calm and well-being and then go, great, I know one of the things that really upset me in my life, or one of the really big moments for myself, and we pull out our biggest trauma or our greatest fear or our deepest anxiety or our biggest heartbreak and go, right, okay, there it is. No, that's not really the approach. If you consider that, if you were learning to maybe lift weights, you're going to go to the gym, you wouldn't start with the biggest machines and the heaviest equipment. You'd start light and you'd slowly build yourself up in terms of that capacity. So the same thing with Yoga Nidra. We might start with a sensation that we find mildly uncomfortable. Say, for example, we get restless legs as we're laying down and stopping, or we get this desire to itch our nose, and we might just practice not reacting, just taking a moment to be with that sensation. Or we might notice mild moments in our lives where we have our feathers a little bit ruffled by somebody, or something just knocks us off of our balance a little way. And we learn the techniques I'm about to share with you. So here's a few ways of meeting yourself. First, foremost, and something that doesn't really seem to exist in a lot of the traditional practices of Yoga Nidra, something I'm very grateful for having a teacher of this who was one part yogic scholar and another part psychologist, is coming into the practice of what we could call welcoming. So welcoming is essentially turning our attention, and our attention is love, turning our attention or our love toward ourselves and saying, oh, hello, James. How are you today? What's here? What's going on? What are you feeling? What's around? What's your mood? Today, I would say my mood is actually quite uplifted, but it's not always. Some days the response might be, I'm sad, or I feel depressed, or I feel mean and angry and wound up, or I feel joyful or very loving. And this is the act of welcoming, starting to turn our attention toward ourselves and saying what's here. And this could be a long journey, depending on the kind of life we've had. Maybe we had the kind of upbringing, this is a more typical upbringing, where at some point a grown-up or a caregiver or a teacher would have turned to you and said, pull yourself together. Or it's not appropriate for you to have those feelings right now. They would have given you some message that would have begun the process of self-divorce or turning one's attention away from oneself. So the practice of welcoming is a whole journey that we go on where we're starting to reframe the idea that there are good and bad experiences, good and bad feelings and emotions, and we become much more interested in what's here. And we learn to receive these visitors as messengers, something that either has something to tell us about life or some painful part of our past that's here for resolution. And the heartbreaking thing about this is that most of us develop most of these beliefs and perceptions in the first 4 years of our lives, when we're very soft and malleable, and we don't have the resilience or the capacity to understand why someone may disregard us and not meet our needs, or dismiss us emotionally, or shame us for having a particular feeling. We don't understand, so we internalize and take it on. And then that kind of carries on through our lives. So this welcoming is like a great balm or a great potential healing. And I feel very heartfelt as I talk about it, because I've seen so much change for so many people with their willingness to actually turn towards what they're really feeling and face themselves and meet what's here. So by learning the practice of welcoming over time and with great care and careful instruction, which you'll find through the Academy course if you're interested and you want to dive into that, there's loads of guidance. A very strong part of the course focuses on this psychological component of working with Yoga Nidra, where we're welcoming. Maybe we're also going to explore the use of opposites, not too quickly, but some of us get to stick in emotional states. So I was being playful earlier and describing my range of emotional states, but one of the ones that I've had to learn about and keeps coming around the block for me is loneliness. I had kind of lonely childhood. I was pretty much on my own, and I learned to be a loner and adapt and cope with that. So I've really had to get up close and personal to loneliness. That's the welcoming, but also to recognize that I don't have to continue to choose to be lonely. And as you come into inquiring as to what might the opposite of that loneliness be, and that's going to be personal for you. For me, it's a sense of connection. So, what would that be like? What would it be like to feel connected to another person? How would I feel that in my body? How would I physically experience it? How might I deepen my connection with other people? These are great reflections that we can start to make with the use of opposites. And most pertinently, to feel it in the body. So, we're lying down in Yoga Nidra, we're accessing this physical self and really having a strong relationship with sensation. And we can ask, what's it like when I feel lonely? Oh, I feel a heaviness in my heart. There's a sadness that accompanies it. I feel small, contracted. What might the opposite of that sensation would be? Well, it would be to feel very loving, very expansive, to feel a sense of lightness and effervescence. So we can embody these different feelings and emotions too, and start to reprogram ourselves with new possibility. We're also learning a meditative trick of taking perspective. And this is the last part of the Yoga Nidra training course on learning to step back, to recognize that there's part of our experience here that has never been broken. Something that's untouched, untainted by the traumas that we've experienced in life, by the difficulties. Part of us that's quietly watching. We could call it the observing self, witness, awareness, consciousness. We could talk about it till we're blue in the face. And I'll give you a lot of guidance on how to find it, a lot of pointing out instructions, but ultimately we find it through the quietness and through rest. We begin to catch glimpses and then have more sustained experiences of a kind of essential part of us that's always been well, that's never been traumatized, that's always been okay. And this forms like another layer of capacity for holding. I talked about the importance of that underlying ground of well-being that we establish in Yoga Nidra practice, the psychological integration, and then we could say kind of above that or around that, containing that, is ultimately this recognition that there's part of us that's untouched and untainted. And as we learn to take perspective and recognize and live into this part of us that's undisturbed, there's more and more self-trust and more of a capacity to begin to meet what's inside us. Now, why would we want to meet trauma? I've been playful about it so far, but what's the value in it? Why would we want to scratch that itch or go down that particular rabbit hole? Couldn't we just leave everything kind of nicely suppressed down in the unconscious? If it's all down there, why would I want to bring it up, James? Well, it's a very good question, and perhaps you don't. But it's wise to reframe it and see that it may come looking for you. You may find that there are themes in your life or ways that you respond to situations or even react to situations that you start to question and then go, oh, that's not everyone else's experience. There's something in me that finds that really difficult. There's something in me that finds it very hard or painful to be in this environment or to have this experience, to be rejected, whatever it might be. And that's our trauma actually coming to knock on our door. And if we have the right skill set, if we know and understand the territory of welcoming, and truly there are some pitfalls, and we do need a guide in this way, but if we understand the process of welcoming And we have this skillful means to meet ourselves, and we have this ground of well-being and also this deeper perspective that there's part of us that's always been okay. We can truly and deeply meet this content. And we can help others to truly and deeply meet this content. And along the way, be inspired by how different we'll feel as a human being when we're not running from ourselves, or when we're not afraid of parts of us that are lingering in the shadows, when we're not hiding away from those bits that make us disconnect or feel overwhelmed or flooded. I mean, flooded's such a word when we're talking about trauma, where a person can start to really get a very strong sense of even panic or what's called dissociation. So as we're meeting trauma, we're working slowly, carefully, gently, meeting, greeting, softly, turning our loving attention toward ourselves. And we'll experience some abreaction along the way, maybe some tears. We're moved, we have some heat come out of the body, we feel bursts of anger coming up within ourselves, and we've learnt this inner holding environment where we don't have to spill that stuff out anymore. And we don't have to be incapacitated by life or hiding away from certain things because they're too triggering or too difficult. Very slowly, very gently, we can learn to metabolize our trauma and become a more fully integrated human being. And as we're able to move into life less afraid, more embodied, more embracing of our whole self, we can then be part of a human family that helps others do the same. And I think probably one of the most valuable things about learning Yoga Nidra in this way is the reflection that we might make of how many lives could we touch? How many people might we be able to truly help? How many people might we be able to show the way to be with themselves and to help them recover from maybe those early years where they were shamed for having feelings or closed down in a particular way, or people that have been through deeply traumatic experiences. The research says this. I mean, I'm watching the clock. I've got 3 minutes to go. So let me just say a few things about the research, so you know that this isn't just all anecdotal, that there's something very powerful and true to this. I was blessed. It was serendipitous, lucky, grace, whatever you want to call it, to have had a teacher who was very interested in Yoga Nidra and science and research and how they marry up. And the particular protocol or practice that I trained in many years ago has something like 35 completed research projects around it. And a big application of the use of this particular style of Yoga Nidra has been working with post-traumatic stress disorder, in particular with veterans or active duty soldiers returning from combat. So Yoga Nidra has been used effectively to help one of the most traumatized populations in the world. And to me, this is beautiful work because many soldiers don't choose to fight. They are simply there through life circumstances or that there was no other choice. So the possibility of offering this to a population that really need it and watching the power and efficacy of it over 15, 20 years now, here are some of the features of it. Reduced anxiety, reduced symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, increased sense of well-being, reduced reactivity. These are some of the researched outcomes in randomized controlled trials. This isn't just, biased research, because a lot of it can be like that out there, but this is proper research. And when we look at what rest does for people in general, just taking a lie down will start to increase your mood for the rest of the day. It will make your memory function improve. It will give you more focus throughout the day. And along with that, if you rest for long enough, your cortisol production, your stress production will drop off. So interestingly, by simply laying down and doing nothing, we're already, I mean, our body knows how to do it. We're already setting the stage for being very deeply at rest and being able to start to meet what's difficult. The thing is, most people don't see it that way, and most people stop at that. But if you're prepared to go the whole way, there is such a huge potential for Yoga Nidra being a deeply powerful modality for starting to heal from our painful past. Ooh, okay, that was a lot. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening. We've got a bit of time for questions and answers, Q&A. So I wonder what you might like to know. And I'm going to do that thing. I've been staring at the camera lens now for 30 minutes, but I'm going to drop my gaze and have a look down in the chat box. And I'm going to see if I can pull out some of the questions here and speak to them. And if you want to just disappear off into the rest of your afternoon, which you might like to do, and I would quite understand, or your morning or your evening, wherever you are in the world, do think about checking out the course that's on offer here. It was really a labor of love for me, produced through one of the 3 lockdowns that we had in the UK with a very dear friend of mine who's a director of photography, and it took a long time to put together. And to me, it's 15 years of experience of teaching, practicing, running teacher trainings on this subject. It's in depth. There's scripts in there. There's recordings for you to follow along. All of the talks are broken down into looking at the different koshas. There's parts and sections of the course that cover neuroscience of meditation and Yoga Nidra. There's elements that look at the philosophy that underpins the practice, both Tantra and traditional meditation. And there's a massive part of the course that's about how to teach. So learning all of the structure, anything from how to use your voice in Yoga Nidra to some of the pitfalls in terms of holding groups, and even sections on how to work with people suffering with pain and trauma. So it's really in depth, and I've loved creating it, and I've loved seeing people come through the course. I'd love to see you there. And part of it is you get to do this with me one-to-one. So part of the course offer is that we give you some one-to-one time with me. You get half an hour to hang out and ask questions and really bring forward what's important and of interest to you. So we felt that was important. So you're not just doing it yourself, but you feel like you've got some support for the whole process too. Okay, let's take a look at these questions. Sir Mikri, if I'm saying that right, I may not be getting that right. You're asking, can a bipolar person practice Yoga Nidra on their own? Shall I process what comes up with, e.g., an EFT practitioner? Well, pathologizing and labeling and diagnosing is kind of outside of my skill set. And I'm not a medical doctor, so I wouldn't like to comment one way or the other. But here's what I will say about it. Why don't you try and see? I can't see a strong reason why bipolar would inhibit someone's ability to lay down and rest. And in terms of coming into inquiry and coming into experience and starting to touch into trauma, then for sure you might need some hand holding. And this is where we might consider mentoring or support. We might actually work one-to-one with someone, and we may use techniques and practices like Yoga Nidra as part of a program of recovery or integration for such conditions. So it's the kind of thing that you might want to speak to a therapist about. It's the kind of thing that you want to do a little bit of digging on. But I personally see no reason, and I know 2 different people who experience, bipolar through a spectrum. One of them has kind of moved through it and is towards the end of their life. I see no reason why that would make you shy away. And in fact, the use of opposites and the application of it could become really interesting in the context of bipolar condition. So thanks for asking the question. I hope that was a good enough answer for you. Vicky's saying, thanks so much. Tell us about the course on Eckhart, please. Hopefully, Vicky, my pitch 2 minutes ago gave you a flavour of that. But if there's something I missed out, or if there's a particular question that you want to ask, drop one again into the chat box, please, and I'll circle around to it. Thank you. Do you need to use the Sankalpa? Mesa is asking, do you need to use the Sankalpa? Well, the Sankalpa, San means kind of born of the heart or born of being. Kalpa means deep intention or wish. So when we're talking about Sankalpa, we're talking about how we're making intentions at the beginning of the practice. Do you have to? No, absolutely not. In the same way, you don't have to do the washing up. I mean, ultimately you do because it piles up. But no, you don't have to use a Sankalpa. In fact, people around the world are lying down all of the time and they're not making these deep intentions for their rest. But you might want to because they're pretty powerful and it can be very cool. So no, you absolutely don't have to do so. But what's great about forming intentions, and I've just been spending a month with a group that I teach on what we could call roadblocks to rest. The reasons or the limitations that we put around ourselves as to why we can't. And that tend to be three popular ones. For example, time. I don't have enough time to do this. I feel kind of guilty that, I don't deserve to rest, or that I should be doing something else with my time, and fear of missing out. Oh, I'm just lying down and doing nothing, and I could be doing something more exciting, like checking my Instagram account or taking a picture of myself looking cool. So when we address those on the surface of things, we could say, well, all right, so you say you don't have any time. I bet you're very good at finding time for the things that are really important to you, like scrolling through Facebook or, whatever else it might be, that box set and sitting on the sofa with the glass of wine or the box of chocolates or the herbal tea, depending on how virtuous you are. You'll find time for the things that are important. So it really starts to ask the question and beg for a deeper intention, which says, if I've got a time problem, actually I have a boundary problem and I have a values problem. I've got a problem around knowing what's really important to me. So if you're saying that laying down and taking rest or learning to meditate or healing from trauma is really important to you, then my goodness, you should definitely think about making some intentions and really starting to get to what's in the way of you actually doing these practices. So I've kind of broken down right there the kind of the inquiry that we might make through an intention. A lot of people come into this practice and they say, I don't know. I don't know why I'm here. I've got no idea. Someone said it was cool, or, I saw the poster, or, I've heard about this. I'm interested, and have no idea what they really want. So we might start asking the question, what do I want? Why am I here? And when words bubble up, like I want rest, I want to feel at ease, I want to be peaceful, I'd like to transform, I'd like to get away from feeling anxious. I mean, that's interesting. Let's take an intention piece around that. When we say, I don't want to feel anxious, our conscious is saying that, but our unconscious just hears anxious, anxious, anxious. When we turn that around into an inquiry that says, if I don't want to feel anxious, what do I want to feel? Oh, I want to feel calm or easeful or relaxed or whatever your word is around it. Now we've got an intention. I want to feel relaxed. Now the problem is the unconscious mind hears, oh, you're going to feel relaxed sometime in the future, but the unconscious mind can't relate to the past or the future. It's just about the present. So we can drop the words I want to and just say calm. My intention is to be calm. And then this can be very powerful for us. It can give us the motivation to keep practicing. It can take us on a journey when we start to see what's in the way of us feeling calm. So I've gone down a few different avenues because it's a webinar and I'm trying to kind of make it interesting and draw appeal for everybody. But Mesa, I hope that to some degree answers your question. I was very playful to begin with and dismissive of it. You certainly don't have to make an intention, but they are incredibly powerful if we know how to do it right. And in the training, in the course, There's a real deep dive into how the relationship goes between your conscious and unconscious mind, and gives you structure for how you make really meaningful intentions, and also will personalize it for you. So you're not left at the end of that part of the course thinking, oh, I still don't know. But you should have a pretty good angle on what you want and why you're practicing Yoga Nidra and where you would like to get to with the practice. And then you'll have some kind of ground to stand on. So what else is here? Teresa asks, I feel like one of those columnists, like love letters to Nikki or something like that. Dear Nikki, I broke up with my husband. No, sorry. Teresa, you're asking, would you mind talking a little more about the layers, please? Thank you. Certainly. So the layers I like in my favorite cake would be tiramisu. So I definitely go with a underneath of sponge with the coffee, maybe a little. All right. So the layers are our bodily experience, the most obvious to touch into. The next is the subtle, more energetic layer, that which animates the physical form, called the pranamaya kosha. The third, manamaya kosha. In the tradition I teach out of, it's feelings into emotions. How our energy system starts to become mobilized. Energy in motion creates emotion. This is the third kosha. The fourth, the Vijnanamaya kosha, thoughts, beliefs, cognitions, and the mental construct of self, where we can start to begin the first kind of dismantling of our sense of I as a limited person in here. Fifth kosha, paradoxical, when you get beyond yourself, you get deep freedom and bliss. So Ananda means joy or bliss. And we may start to have very expansive and quite blissful experiences as part of Yoga Nidra. And then what's beyond that is not defined by a kosha, and it's that quiet essence I talked about, that stillness that's beyond and untouched by anything, but is undeniable and true. And that's the kosha model. And the training will take you on a walk or an experience or a journey all of the way through those different koshas and introduce you to practices and theory as to how you can meet these different layers of your experience. For example, how we may want to use a Yoga Nidra practice to meet a belief that we hold about ourselves. For example, I'm unlovable, or I'm not worthy of belonging, or I feel unsafe. And that belief may have some thoughts, images, and memories. That's the trauma, the memory that's stored. There will be some bodily experiences, some sensations that come with that, certainly some feelings. No one can walk around feeling unlovable or unsafe without having some kind of feeling in their body. So we look at Yoga Nidra as this kind of system of being able to pull out, take out certain parts of our experience, but also recognize that they're integrated within a whole. None of us get to walk around without a body, even though most people are stuck in their heads and kind of live somewhat outside of it. We are all embodied to a lesser or greater degree. So the koshas are very valuable in terms of looking at these different layers of our experience and being able to go into one of them and help integrate it back into the whole of our experience. Vicky, you're asking here, can this Yoga Nidra be practiced after an asana practice or as a standalone? Oh, both, for sure. Morning, noon, and night, whenever you'd like. If you get into it, you might find that even some days, and I've seen people go through like, oh, can I do this? Some days you could just lay down and do nothing other than be with yourself. But yeah, for sure, it's something that you can integrate into asana practice. And you can do a 10-minute Yoga Nidra. I personally prefer longer practices because I think they get to the parts that other practices, shorter practices, can't reach. They get us deeper into that sense of being and stillness. But yeah, you can integrate this into whatever else you like to do as a kind of contemplative or spiritual practice, for sure. Love the Rain is asking. Love your handle there. Love the Rain. Thanks for the info, James. I'm curious if holding space with what comes up during teaching Yoga Nidra classes is a specific part of the course. To some degree, it is Love the Rain. And then what's interesting is that I'm about to offer something to everybody who's participated in that course historically or who's going to register, to look at the specifics of what it would be like to be a teacher that moves into this arena, and the kind of skill set that you need to know to help people hold trauma. And that is a very particular skill set. It's something that I teach as part of my face-to-face Yoga Nidra trainings, but it's very hard to put into the Yoga Nidra course on Eckhart because it involves an interactive element. It needs to be something that we really do live. So I'm looking at that, but the essence of it is learning to be in co-meditation with another, where we are able to listen and hold and be with that other person's discomfort or abreaction, whatever's coming up for them, and be the safe container that they need. And it's a whole journey. It's a beautiful journey. And it's one of the favorite things that I love to teach. So if you join in with the course, you'll get an invitation in the coming weeks to start to explore some of that content if it's of interest to you. Michelle is asking here, James, can you say more about the research studies? I'm a yoga teacher and I work in a prison. Would like to read more. Google is going to be your doorway in for that one, my lovely. There's a whole rake of information out there. It depends on what you're interested in. You either might want to search the general research around rest, or maybe more specifically on Yoga Nidra. I gave you a little bit of a taster of both of those. And then if you Google completed research projects on Yoga Nidra, you'll get to all of the scholarly articles. And you want to read the abstract, which is essentially the kind of findings, because reading research can be very dry and dull. And if you want to know a little bit more, find a way to get personally in contact with me. You can Google me and find me through a variety of platforms, and I'd be happy to give you a little bit more information. What differentiates meditation from Yoga Nidra? Okay. Not a lot and a great deal. So the difficulty is in definition here. And if we're talking about meditation as a non-doing, like a non-dual form of meditation, it's very different to maybe a structured approach, something like mindfulness or transcendental meditation. So it kind of depends on what we're talking about to be able to compare apples to apples. But to give you a general overview, Yoga Nidra is a form of meditation. It's a form of self-inquiry, and it has these very particular structures and layers to the process. So where it's very useful is to, for example, help someone recovering from trauma, or help someone developing emotional resilience, or to help someone inquire into beliefs that they hold to be true about themselves. There's this great structure and a vast potential of what you do with Yoga Nidra, and depending on how you practice it, what you might get to. Meditation, if we keep it really simple, and I do this every morning, let's say meditation is more sitting and just being quiet and noticing. We might watch our breath for a while just to establish a sense of focus and concentration. And then we go out from that kind of narrow focus view into a wide angle. And we sit and we just notice our mind, notice the sounds, notice everything coming and going. Ultimately, that's where Yoga Nidra is going to take you. Because as you get to know that quiet part of yourself, you're going to love it. And really, the whole journey of Yoga Nidra is to take you to that place where you might become interested in simply sitting still and watching everything coming and going. So there's a tremendous amount of crossover, but unfortunately, to really get to the meat of your question, we'd need to, be in a room and have a conversation that goes back and forwards, which isn't so much a, webinar setting. I can see a few of you now kind of, moving out of the process. It's been long, nearly 50 minutes now. You might find concentration starts to waver a bit. I'm going to be diligent and see if I can get to these last couple of questions. But if you're tuning out, thank you so much for spending some time with me this afternoon and listening. I've really appreciated being here with you all and doing these shares. So last couple of questions. Chiara here, could you direct me to some of the research publications? Okay, you mentioned on PTSD. and Yoga Nidra. Sure, if you Google post-traumatic stress disorder and Yoga Nidra, you're going to find that research. It's all out there. And you can also go to irest.org and you'll find a whole load of information on the IREST protocol and working with post-traumatic stress disorder. What have we got here? Can people with traumatic brain injuries participate in group Yoga Nidra? Absolutely. I've had 2 people with TBIs. Yes, TBIs. And they found the practice to be very healing and very helpful for them, for sure. Could you say more about how you approach certain elements of Yoga Nidra for those experiencing chronic pain or chronic illness? Yes, Natalia, I can. And there's a whole load of information on that within the program. But to be succinct, it's the whole welcoming piece. Helping people with pain is paradoxical, and what's the turn of phrase? Spoiler, I'm about to swear. The truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. So actually working with pain for a lot of people is about being able to formulate that foundation of well-being in whatever way. I listed a number of techniques right at the beginning of this webinar. Once we've got that sense of well-being, it's turning toward the pain. And doing things like, if it's physical pain, going into the center of the pain site, moving our attention out to the periphery, going to the center, to the periphery, to the center, to the periphery, to discover we can't find the center and we don't know where it stops. And to peel off the mental construct. So there's one thing feeling physical pain, and then the layers that we put on top of it are, I've been feeling this forever, it's never going to go away, it's destroying the quality of my life. So starting to look at the mind state that we hold around pain. And there are other more subtle ways that we can work. We can work with color, with imagery, all sorts of possibilities here. But what I have seen is, and I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, Natalia, is the welcoming piece. When we can get really skillful at being with ourselves, and trust me, that's a journey. I've seen people, a month after coming on a training going, wow, it's amazing. I'm really welcoming myself. And I sort of, just you wait. And then after 5 years' time, you're like, oh, okay, I think I know myself a bit more fully now. And then after 20 years that someone's been doing the welcoming, they might say, I don't know myself at all. I don't know what's going to pop up next. I'm like a wild card, a jack in the box. I have no idea what's inside this human experience. That's kind of curiosity that we develop through welcoming. But our capacity to be with ourselves is the most important way to heal out of pain. Do you have a course for people just wanting to learn it for themselves rather than to teach? Yeah, come out if you're still here and listening. That is actually why I developed this course, and it's for both. So although there's teaching elements in there, it's really a strong focus on personal practice. And actually, there isn't a teacher out there in the world, well, I hope there isn't, who's teaching this without having gone on the journey for themselves. And they certainly won't be a great teacher until they've actually done the work for themselves. So really the course is aimed at both people. We called it Teaching Yoga Nidra simply because that's what Eckhart Yoga do. It's a teacher training academy. But for sure, I would go on that course myself. In fact, I do go on that course sometimes and listen to some of the practices and engage in the content to remind myself. But I would be taking that course just from the perspective of healing my own trauma and meeting myself as a human being. I believe that everything's there, that you want to do that as a personal journey, for sure. So, okay, so many comments. Could you all stop being so interested, please? I've already done the IRS level 1 training, but feel very drawn to do this course with yourself. Would this be a good thing to do before moving on to any further training? Sharon, only you can say. There'll be some crossover, and we learn from different teachers in different ways. So if you feel drawn to that and you have an inner spark or a yes for you, then that's your answer. I wouldn't want to say either way. It will definitely be different because Every way that every teacher teaches is different. And that could be the thing that you're being drawn to more than anything else right now. For sure, you could take this course as a next step before you did your other bits of the IRES training, if that felt right to you. But ultimately, it has to be in you, my lovely. Penelope says, dear James, I've been in love with no. Penelope says, James, how do you equate EFT tapping and Yoga Nidra? Both seem to reach the sub-unconscious and help with PTSD. Sorry, it's outside of my skill set, Penelope. I don't know enough about EFT to be able to answer your question in depth, and I don't want to take a kind of rough stab at it. What I hear is that there is a good crossover in terms of working with the unconscious, but I'm going to have to put my hands up and say, no dice on that one. I'm afraid I can't answer your question in any kind of depth or with any real assurity. I'm wondering, this is Teresa, hi Teresa, wondering if there are any publications which delve more into the layers. So I'm 63 tomorrow, and congratulations, 63 tomorrow, Teresa. Nice work. And I find reading books easier. Yeah, you can read. I wrote The Book of Rest about 3-4 years ago with my now ex-partner, Gabrielle. And it's on Audible if you like to listen to things. Or you can pick up a copy of it from Amazon or other slightly more ethical book resellers. Called The Book of Rest, published by HarperCollins 2019. That would be a really great way of getting into the depth practices of Yoga Nidra for sure. Bay's asking, do you have experience with Yoga Nidra and adolescence? Release the pressure, pitta imbalances. Okay, for those of you who don't know, pitta imbalances, nothing to do with bread. Looking at Ayurveda, which is a particular kind of modality that complements the realm of yoga. Yeah, I've worked with adolescent kids and had some success, big challenges with restlessness with them. I feel under a lot of pressure. Most of it is the welcoming piece, giving them a safe environment. They tend to giggle a lot through Yoga Nidra and be really silly. So you need to be willing to hold space for those kind of groups in a very patient, loving way. But I've worked in schools and worked with one-to-one with 4 or 5 different adolescents with different maladies and complaints, and had some really great success with the practice of Yoga Nidra by interviewing them, recording them, personal practice. It's really helped. Okay. Of course, I can do Nidra daily. It's my favorite practice. Yeah, I hear you. Okay. So I believe we're there. The questions are over. You can go and have why don't you go and have a lay down? I hear there's this really great thing that you could do called Yoga Nidra. I wonder whether you might come and join us for this training. We'd love to have you along. It's been such a pleasure to be with you all. And if something here has ignited your interest, I'll say to you what I said to someone just a few minutes ago, which is, inside yourself, in your own heart, in your own gut, and it's normally a relationship between those two as to what's right for you. And then our mind tends to just get in the way and be practical with things like, oh, it's not the time, or I can't afford that, or I'll never complete it, or all of that stuff. If you know that it feels right for you, then come and dive in. And we'd love to have you join the program. There's usually, Masha and I haven't talked about this, but we usually give some sort of 48-hour offer for everyone that came through the webinar. So there'll be an opportunity to get this at a discounted price. And sometimes you just got to do these things and dive in. So trust in your inner knowing. If it feels right for you, take the dive and come and join the now numerous people that have come through this training and get support along the way. Yeah, wonderful. 1 minute to go, 1 full hour. Stay well and happy, everybody. Tremendous amounts of love and well-being to you wherever you are in the world, and know whatever trauma that lives within you, you can touch that and integrate that and Make it part of your experience and something that you no longer need to run or hide from. Lovely to be with you all. Stay well and happy.